Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive. This time we're going to be exploring a fascinating topic that I'm really excited about, which is Indian Management Sutras.
Yeah.
And I think it'll be really interesting to sort of look at these ancient principles and see how they can apply to our modern lives. Right?
Absolutely. It's surprising how relevant they still are.
Yeah. So we'll be using Devdutt Pattanaik's book on Management Sutras for this deep dive and focusing on a few key concepts: Karta, Karyakarta, and Yajaman. Yes, I know those might sound a bit unfamiliar, but they're really interesting ways to think about decision-making.
They are. And they get to the heart of something we all deal with, how to balance taking initiative and following directions.
So to illustrate this, Pattanaik starts with a story from the Ramayana, the epic.
Yeah.
It's the story of Sita's dilemma. Remember how she's told to stay within this protective line, but then a hermit comes along asking for food,
Right.
and she steps outside because, well, hospitality is like a huge deal in that culture.
It is. And in doing that, she becomes a karta, a decision maker. She could have stayed put, been a karyakarta, a follower, but she chose to act. Even though, things didn't exactly end well.
Exactly. It's like that decision, small as it might seem, had these huge ripple effects. Makes you wonder, could she have fulfilled her duty in another way? Maybe, but it raises the whole question of rules versus judgment.
Yeah.
Especially when things are unpredictable.
Absolutely. I mean, there's always this tension between sticking to the rules and responding to the situation at hand. No easy answers there, and the Ramayana captures that so well.
Then Pattanaik brings it to a more modern context with Mahmud and Rajiv, who are trying to choose a COO.
Right.
Mahmud's the CEO, so ultimately he's the Karta there. Rajiv's giving input, acting more like a Karyakarta. But here's the fascinating thing: Pattanaik says everyone can be a Karta.
Exactly. He uses this great analogy of the mind as the serpent Adyanantasesha. The serpent can be dormant, then teeming with ideas, then focused on action, like our minds.
So it's like we can choose to be passive, or we can tap into that potential and actually, make decisions, act on them.
Absolutely. We can be like a karta or even a yajaman, someone who enables decisions in others. Or we can be more reactive, like a karyakarta, or what he calls a reluctant devata.
Okay, now this Yajaman thing, that's really intriguing. Sounds like a leader who empowers others to step up. But I'd love to hear more about how that works in practice.
Well, Pattanaik uses another story, this time about Vishnu, Narad, and Garud. Narad, even though he's devoted, he's always hesitant to act without instructions, always wants Vishnu's approval.
Total Karyakarta, waiting for direction.
Totally. Garud, on the other hand, he anticipates Vishnu's needs, takes initiative. He's more like a karta. But what makes Vishnu a Yajman is that he allows Garud that freedom to act. He creates the space for it.
I see. It's like those leaders who trust their teams to make decisions, give them the support they need, and then, step back and let them run with it.
Exactly. It's about fostering that environment where people feel empowered to take initiative. And Pattanaik gives a great modern example with our Indam, who's a team leader. He notices this dynamic with his team members. Meena is always anticipating needs, proposing solutions, while Ralph waits for specific instructions before doing anything.
Oh, that's so interesting how those different approaches play out in a team. It's not just about getting things done, it's about how people approach the work,
And a good Yajaman gets that. They understand that empowering others makes the whole organization better. But, and this is where it gets interesting, that power to enable, it comes with a responsibility to make tough choices too.
Okay, I see where you're going with this. What are the downsides then? What makes being a Yajaman so challenging?
Well, think about it. A Yajaman, they can grant opportunities, but they can also take them away. Pattanaik uses the story of Vishwamitra guiding Ram to kill Tataka, the demoness, and free Ahalya from her curse.
Yeah, that's a powerful story. It's like Vishwamitra's pushing Ram to confront his own beliefs, make difficult choices, even if they go against what's expected,
Exactly. And it highlights the weight of being a Yajaman. They make choices that impact the devatas, the employees who depend on them, like a leader who has to promote one person over another or even let someone go.
Right. It's not always about being popular. It's about what's best for the whole, even if it means, difficult consequences for some. Like Pattanaik's example with Jake, who has to fire an underperforming employee and then mentor this challenging junior team member.
Yeah, that captures it well. Leadership has this dual nature, you lift people up, but sometimes you got to make choices that affect them negatively. It's not always easy.
It really makes you think about the impact of leadership decisions, doesn't it? But Pattanaik also talks about how every contribution has value, no matter how small, which I find really inspiring.
Absolutely. He uses the story of the squirrel, the one who adds a pebble to Ram's bridge to Lanka.
Oh.
The monkeys mock the squirrel, but Ram praises its effort. It's about giving your all, regardless of how big or small the task is.
That's such a great message. It's like, how do we as leaders create that culture where everyone feels valued, encouraged to contribute, no matter what their role is?
That's the key question, isn't it? And Pattanaik connects this to the concepts of Kupamanduka, the frog in a well, and Chakravarti, the emperor. It's about how the scale of your world doesn't limit your potential for decision-making.
So it's not about your title. It's about that willingness to step up, like Pattanaik's example with Mr. Lal, who runs a factory and values those squirrels, those problem solvers, at every level of his business.
Exactly. He recognizes that those who are willing to be kartas, to take initiative, they're the real assets, no matter where they are in the hierarchy.
This is giving me a lot to think about in terms of how I lead my own team. Sometimes it's the quiet ones, the small actions that make a big difference.
Absolutely. And it reminds us that leadership isn't just about top-down decisions. It's about creating that space where everyone can contribute. But of course, every decision comes with uncertainty, right?
Oh, absolutely. That feeling of, did I make the right call? And it's even worse when things don't go as planned. Pattanaik uses the story of King Vikramaditya and the Vettel to explore that.
Yeah, it's such a captivating story, and it really highlights how decisions are subjective, how we often don't know the full impact until much later. All those riddles and answers, they really show how complex and ambiguous things can be.
And Pattanaik connects it to modern-day pressures, like with Deepak, the entrepreneur who's dealing with investors and media scrutiny. It's like, as your responsibilities grow, that pressure to have all the answers just intensifies.
And you can get so caught up in trying to justify every decision as some strategic masterstroke, when really, maybe it was intuition, maybe even a bit of luck.
It's so true. We want to believe we're in control, but there's always that element of not knowing. And speaking of not knowing, Pattanaik also talks about the importance of context in decision-making, which feels incredibly relevant today,
Absolutely. He brings back the Vettel, who asks Vikramaditya this thought-provoking question about who a child's true father is. And the answer depends on the culture, the societal norms. It challenges this idea that there's always one right answer.
And he uses examples from the Ramayana and the Mahabharata too, showing how laws and ethics change over time, differ between cultures. It makes you realize how much your own background shapes your decisions, and how that might be different for someone else.
That's the key takeaway there. What's ethical in one situation might not be in another. And Pattanaik brings it to the present with Mr. Gupta, who's trying to choose a successor for his business. No easy answer there.
There really isn't. Family, business, personal desires, it all gets tangled up. Shows how complex those big decisions can be, how personal and professional intertwine.
It does. And it emphasizes how important it is to consider the whole picture, the potential consequences, all the perspectives involved.
It makes you realize how easy it is to get stuck in your own limited view.
Yeah, right.
And how crucial it is to step back and see the bigger picture. But there's another layer to this that I find fascinating. Karma.
Yes, the consequences of our actions. Pattanaik dives into this with the stories of Dashrath and Pandu, who both accidentally kill with their arrows, leading to tragedy. Powerful reminder that our actions have a real impact, intended or not.
They do. Our decisions don't exist in a vacuum. They ripple outward, affecting ourselves, others, the whole world around us. Like Pattanaik's example with Ritwik, who faces family opposition when he starts his own business.
It shows how even when you own your choices, there can be unintended consequences you have to navigate. That's something every Karta, every Yajaman has to face.
Okay, so we're seeing how these principles offer this framework for understanding decision-making with all its nuances. But I feel like there's still more to uncover, especially when it comes to how we evaluate decisions in hindsight,
There is absolutely so much more to explore, especially the role of hindsight and how we tend to rationalize our choices after the fact.
Well, I'm hooked. We'll definitely have to continue this deep dive in our next episode.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
So, we were talking about those unexpected consequences, how even the best intentions can lead to outcomes we didn't foresee.
Yeah, it really highlights that interconnectedness, how our actions have these ripple effects we can't always control or predict. But I'm curious, how does karma factor into all this? Like, how does it affect how we view our decisions later on?
That's a good question. Pattanaik brings up the story of Garud, you remember, saving that sparrow, only to unknowingly lead it to its death. It's a tough one because he meant well, right?
He did. And yet, it shows how even good deeds can have unintended negative consequences. Makes you think about those times when you try to help someone and it backfires,
Yep.
Makes you realize you don't always have the answers.
It's humbling, isn't it? And it underscores the need to own our actions even when the outcomes aren't what we hoped for. Pattanaik then gives the example of Parole, who leaves her job to be an entrepreneur. And it's successful.
But she didn't plan for that success, did she? Makes her wonder if quitting was even the right call. I think we all do that, judge our decisions based on the outcome, even when it's outside our control.
It's so easy to get caught up in that result-oriented thinking, but sometimes the journey itself has value, regardless of where you end up, right? We learn from those unexpected turns.
You're right, maybe it's not just about the destination, but what we learn along the way. But speaking of judging decisions, Pattanaik also talks about how we tend to rationalize our choices afterward, especially when they're successful.
Ah, yes, the rewriting of history. He uses the example of Arjun, using Shikhandi to defeat Bhisma in the Kurukshetra War. Now there's debate about Shikhandi's gender identity, and that's important because it shows how the Pandavas' victory shaped how people saw Arjun's decision.
So it's all about context and perspective, right? If they'd lost, that same choice might be seen as unethical, but they won, so it becomes this clever strategic move.
Exactly. And Pattanaik links this to the corporate world, where success often leads to these narratives of brilliant planning, even if there was luck involved. It's like those project reviews where everyone wants to make it seem like it all went perfectly according to plan.
It's so true. We smooth over the bumps, the lucky breaks. But it's important to acknowledge those, right? The messiness of it all. Pattanaik uses the example of Dr. Sulopa, the snack developer. She feels this need to explain her success as all market research strategy, when actually intuition played a big part.
It's like she has to fit this creative process into a neat, logical box. But creativity's not always like that, is it? It's more intuitive, more about experimenting.
Right, we need to honor that. Trying to make every decision fit this perfect narrative can actually stifle creativity.
This makes me think about how I approach my own work, how I look at both the successes and failures. But before we get too deep into analyzing the past, I want to bring it back to the Yajaman, that responsibility they have for their choices.
Yes, a crucial aspect of leadership. Pattanaik contrasts Ram with the Pandavas here. Ram accepts his exile, takes responsibility for the events that led to it. The Pandavas, they blame others for their misfortunes.
So Ram embodies that true Yajaman, owning his choices. Good or bad, no blame shifting. It's so different from the Pandavas, who seem stuck in resentment. It is. Ram's acceptance, even though it's based on a decision he didn't make, shows true responsibility. It's not about fairness, it's about acknowledging those consequences and how you respond. Pattanaik then gives the example of Jaideep, who loses his job in New York, a choice he made instead of staying in India. The recession wasn't his fault, but he owns the decision, the outcome. It's a powerful example of accountability, even when things are out of your control. Leadership embraces those triumphs and setbacks,
Absolutely. We can't always control the results, but we can control our response.
Yeah.
But there's a flip side to this too, right? The unexpected rewards that come from those tough choices.
Oh, yes. This is where it gets inspiring. Pattanaik tells the story of King Indradyumna, who's denied entry back into paradise because no one remembers his good deeds on earth.
Right. He has to prove he lived a virtuous life, but no one recalls his generosity.
And then a tortoise remembers this lake that was created by the cows Indradyumna had given away as charity. Unintentional, but impactful.
It's like our actions can have these unforeseen ripple effects, creating positive change in ways we never imagined. Makes you realize the most impactful consequences might be the unplanned ones.
I love that. And Pattanaik brings it to life with Harish Saheb, whose factory indirectly leads to a hospital being built and named after him. His legacy is built on these unintended but meaningful consequences.
It makes you think about the potential impact of your own choices, how they might extend beyond what you can even conceive. Inspiring, right? Even small acts of kindness can set things in motion.
It is. We all have the potential to make a difference, and it might show up in the most unexpected ways.
Wow, this has been an incredible deep dive. From understanding Karta, Karya-Karta, Yajaman, to exploring context, karma, and those unexpected rewards, it's clear these ancient Indian principles offer this amazing framework for decision-making in all aspects of life.
They do, and they remind us that decision-making isn't just about data and logic, it's about the human element, the interconnectedness of our actions, and accepting that uncertainty is a part of it all.
I feel so inspired to apply these insights, But before we wrap up, what's one key takeaway you hope our listeners will take away from this? Something they can actually use in their lives?
That's a great question. I think it boils down to embracing that uncertainty. We'll never have all the answers, the future is always unknown, but we shouldn't be afraid to make choices. We can approach them with responsibility, knowing there will be consequences, intended and unintended.
And those consequences might just lead to something amazing, something that shapes our lives and the lives of others in ways we never thought possible.
Exactly. It's in that not knowing, that uncertainty, where we often find the most profound insights, make the most meaningful contributions.
That's a beautiful thought. Embracing the unknown, seeking those unexpected rewards, and realizing we all have that potential to be Kardis and Yajamans in our own lives. This has been an incredible journey, a whole new perspective on decision-making and leadership.
I'm so glad to hear that. And I really encourage everyone to check out Devdutt Pattanaik's work. His insights are, well, they're really transformative.
They are. So to everyone listening, as you navigate your own lives, remember the wisdom of the Karta, Karyakarta, and the Yajaman. Embrace uncertainty, own your choices, and keep an eye out for those unexpected rewards that life throws your way.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.
It's really incredible how these stories, these principles, they feel so relevant even today. It's like they're tapping into something universal about being human, something that goes beyond time and culture.
It is remarkable, isn't it, how they resonate across centuries. Challenges of leadership, the choices we make, how action leads to consequence, it's all there. Like a guidebook for navigating life's complexities, you could say.
A guidebook, I like that. It connects us back, reminds us we're not alone in facing these questions. But it's also a call to action, right? To be more intentional, more aware in our decisions, maybe even braver.
Exactly. These principles aren't meant to be just admired, they're meant to be lived, to guide our actions, shape our choices in the real world.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's that one thing you hope our listeners take away and actually use in their lives?
That's a good question. I think the core message is this. Everyone can be a Karta, a decision maker, and a Yajaman, someone who empowers others. It's not about titles or positions, it's about that willingness to step up, to take responsibility, and make choices that align with your values, even when it's hard.
It's about realizing we each have that power to create change in our own lives and the world around us.
And remembering to embrace uncertainty. We'll never have all the answers. The future is always, uncertain. But that's part of what makes life interesting, don't you think? Full of possibility.
It is. It's a reminder to approach those challenges with a sense of curiosity, to learn from mistakes, and keep going, even when the path isn't clear.
And who knows what we might find along the way. Maybe those unexpected rewards that make it all worthwhile.
That's a great way to put it. Embracing the unknown, those unexpected rewards, and recognizing that potential within each of us. This has been an amazing deep dive, a whole new way of looking at decisions and leadership.
I'm so glad to hear that. And I encourage everyone listening to check out Devdutt Pattanaik's work. His insights are, they're truly eye-opening.
They are. So to all our listeners out there, as you navigate your own lives, remember the wisdom of the Karta, Karyakarta, and the Yajaman. Embrace that uncertainty, own your choices, and keep an eye out for those unexpected rewards. They're out there.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep.